Hi, and welcome to another edition of B.E.P Talks, where we bring you extraordinary people doing amazing things from a cross section of the world in a completely diverse area of expertise. And the goal is always to share that expertise with viewers. And what they're sharing is always based on their own beliefs, experiences, and passions. And that's what makes it so real and so authentic. And today is certainly no exception. Today, B.E.P Talks brings you the amazing Maureen Kures, who is in an extremely important line of work, shall I say, something that maybe we don't always talk about, but that we need to. And Maureen is here today to kind of share with us why it's so important to have these conversations. So with no further ado, welcome, Maureen.
Thank you, Beth. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Truly my pleasure and blessing to have you here. Right to the point. Two things that we know are inevitable, at least here in the United States. It's taxes, although for some of us, maybe not so much, and death, right? And why does the topic of death literally scare us to death?
It does scare us to death. I always say, does speaking of dying scare you to death? It does, because none of us like to contemplate the inevitable end of our life. So it's easier just to pretend like it's not going to happen. And, you know, as you said taxes, but we don't actually have to pay our taxes. They'll hunt us down. But, you know, I know some people that haven't always paid their taxes.
I know.
Yeah. And there's just no getting out of it.
And it's such a strange thing because it is a very natural phase of life. And without getting into any sort of religious beliefs, shall we say, strictly from the human perspective, it is absolutely inevitable. It is not a punishment. It is a natural course of being a human being. People think I talk about death often, and I don't talk about dying, but I have said, and only to a handful of people very close to me, is have you had a conversation with your husband, your wife, someone telling them what you want? And they look at me and go, why are you so focused on this? I said, no, I'm not focused on it for me, but I don't want to be one of the persons potentially left with wondering what you would have wanted. Is that where the challenge is? It's not so much just about knowing what I want, but it's about knowing what the people nearest and dearest to us want.
Yes. You know, when we know what they want, or when they know what we want, we give them that gift. We give them that roadmap to follow, and it takes away the drama, trauma, and chaos. So my background is as a nurse. I started off in oncology. I wanted no part of it because my family did not talk about death and dying. And when people in my family died, it was sad, but we never really talked about it after. So I thought, this is so scary. I don't want to be part of this, but I thought I'll get my experience and then get out. But what I found is that it wasn't scary, and it could be quite beautiful. There's a time for healing. There's a time for laughter and joy and celebrating a life well lived, but most people don't talk about it, so they don't have that opportunity. And then I've also saw the other side of the coin where it was truly drama, trauma, and chaos because, you know, the person ends up in the ICU, where I also worked in the ICU, and they have shocked that their family members on a ventilator. They have no idea what they would want. They have disagree with family members, because if you don't have that one person that can speak legally for you, it goes to the next in. Well, that might be your spouse, but if you don't have a spouse, it might be your children. And if there's multiple next of kin that have equal say, they all have to agree. And that doesn't always happen. And that can cause just fractured families. So I became passionate about encouraging people to have these conversations, make those decisions, and get that person that can legally speak on your behalf, so that that doesn't happen. If something happens, you have someone that knows your wishes and someone that will honor them.
Right. And certainly at the time of the death of anyone in a family, to have anything else cause a as you say, trauma drama, which can potentially become a non-ending schism in a family because of the death. I mean, that's like ultimate death for the whole family in a way. How sad is that? You mentioned the word legal, and I wasn't even thinking of it from that perspective. There is a legal perspective here.
Yes. With having that healthcare power of attorney documentation completed, that gives someone the ability to speak on your behalf should you become unable to do so. And what's so important about that is that if your family's all in disagreement, that one person has the ability to say, no, this is not what you would have wanted done. I two quick examples. That ICU nurse that I ended up with a woman that had 4 children. She was 63. She was healthy, had played tennis in the morning, took her 85-year-old mother to a doctor's appointment and out to lunch, and crashed her car into the bushes on the way home because she had a massive heart attack. Well, by the time she ended up in the ICU, she was heavily sedated on a ventilator. And as the days passed, they tried to wean the sedation to take her off the ventilator, but she didn't wake up. So they did a brain scan, and she had no brain activity, meaning that she did not. Her mom performed CPR as she had seen it on TV, but this was back in the mid-90s, and we didn't have cell phones glued to our hands, So her mom started it as she had seen it on TV, but she didn't get enough oxygen to her brain. So the doctors talked to the family about taking her off the ventilator. Well, she had 4 children. 2 of them wanted to, 2 of them did not. And it was like a war zone. And that woman stayed on a ventilator. It would not happen where she would stay in the hospital now, but she was in the ICU for 6.5 weeks before her heart stopped. And the sad thing is they had to do CPR to, I was on that day, and we had to initiate what's called a code, doing CPR. And it was very short. It was just so traumatic for all of us to do CPR on a brain dead woman. And that's when I thought, it should not be like this. People have to have conversations. With those conversations, there's potential for peacefulness. Not always. Sometimes it doesn't work that way, but more often than not, if they had talked about what she would want, and if they had talked about the what if I had a heart attack after playing tennis and taking my mom to the doctor, then they would have been able to cope with it better, and they would have been able to honor her wishes. And even if they didn't, she would have had that one person that could say, this is not what mom wants, or this is not what Judy wants, because it might be her friend that was the power of attorney, and they could make the decision.
And you mentioned that particular woman she was 63 years old. So no one wants to think of dying at 63. No. That is still relatively young, is it not?
Yes.
Please tell me it's relatively young. Right? So that begs the question, when is the best time to have that conversation about saying, here's what I want?
Okay, so, people don't think about this, but young people die. And so once someone turns 18, they are a legal adult, and their family members, parents think they're my child. Of course I can have access to, but that's not the case, because once they turn 18, the family can't have access to their medical records unless they give them permission.
Oh, okay.
And there's someone I know whose nephew was at college in the Midwest, so freshman year of college, and his roommate walked in and he wasn't responsive. He was in the bed, unresponsive. The parents were in California, he was in the Midwest, and the doctors would not talk to them over the phone until they could get there and prove that they were his family member.
Well, you can appreciate that, right? You can appreciate the perspective.
That's part of the HIPAA laws and everything, the privacy laws, but how traumatic it was for that family.
Oh,
That their beloved son, who they had sent off to college, they have no access. He died, and they determined it was a heart arrhythmia. There's something called long QT that, but the desperation they felt by not being able to get any information, where if they had had that power of attorney documentation once they turn 18, they could have just sent it to the doctors, sent it to the hospital, and they would have had access right away. So it's so, people don't think that 18-year-olds die. They don't think that 30-year-olds die. But by having these conversations, I call them courageous conversations, it gives us a clear path. So I was my uncle's healthcare decision maker, healthcare power of attorney, because his daughter was still alive, my cousin, but he knew it would be too traumatic for her. She had a brother die at a young age in a plane crash. Her other brother died of a heart attack in his mid-40s. And he had asked me, well, my uncle was very, very clear about what he wanted. We had many, many, many conversations about it. And he had moved from Seattle down to Palm Desert. And he would drive up and down the West Coast, back and forth. He was 87, almost 80, up in Seattle 2 weeks prior to not waking up one morning. And my mom called me. Something's wrong with Bill. It was her brother. They used to have their wine flashes every night. They'd sit on the phone, and he lived in Palm Desert. She was 2 hours away. Well, he ended up not waking up one morning, but he was still alive. He had had a bleed into his brain. And the surgeons called. And I had to talk to the neurosurgeon that wanted to go in and evacuate the bleed. And he told me exactly what they would do. And I said, well, will he be able to live independently after this? Well, no, but there's like a 25 to 50% chance that we could get him to speak again. And I said, that's not good enough. Well, it kept pressuring me. And I said, can he play golf again? He was at his golf kickoff luncheon yesterday. Very excited about the upcoming golf season. And he said, well, no, but we can probably get him to talk again. There's at least a 50% chance. And I said, that's not good enough. He made it very clear to me what was acceptable and not. So after 5 times of telling this neurosurgeon no, he finally got the message. But it was devastating to me. This was my beloved uncle that we thought he'd be driving up and down the West Coast till he was 100, But it was such a gift because I had the ability and the confidence to say, no, this isn't what he wanted. That would not be honoring his wishes. And he gave me a very clear plan to follow, and I was so grateful.
And did you have all of that documented between you and him?
Yes.
So that's the thing. You say it's a courageous conversation, and it is. It's a generous conversation, but it has to be more than a conversation.
It does have to be more than a conversation. You have to make your healthcare decisions, what you would and wouldn't want. And it's something that you should, there's things called advanced directive. And I work with people to get advanced directives completed, deciding who's going to be your decision maker, if you not be the decision maker, who do you trust to make decisions on your behalf? Who is willing to listen to you, and who has the courage? Because it was hard to be telling that doctor no. For my uncle, we were devastated. He was excited about golfing the day before, and then all of a sudden, he's not waking up. But who do you trust to honor your wishes, even to honor something that you might never have spoken about, but you trust them to do what you feel would be in your best, what they feel would be in your best interest.
So it seems somewhat logical, I guess, and practical that you would have this conversation with a spouse or life partner, a child, all of your children together, so they all hear, and then you document it, and then there's someone, I guess, who just has to affect it, who just has to put it in motion. And is that the best way to do it? Can you do it on a less emotional basis, maybe with just, I don't want to say just, but with a a dear friend. Can anybody be that person for another
Yes.
person?
I always say you decide, you document, and then you discuss. So first you have to make your decisions. Then you have to get it documented. And the good thing about advanced directives is they're free. You can change them anytime. You don't have to go through an attorney. And they are legally binding as long as they're witnessed or notarized. And in some states it's both, witnessed and notarized.
So
But
it's different states, okay. So wow, okay, so you can change it at any time, like a will. If you put a codicil in a will and it's too close to the time of death, sometimes it becomes suspicious, particularly if you had a declining mental capacity. Did they really know what they were doing? Was someone trying to manipulate them? But in this case, you can change it at any time and it becomes binding.
yes, as long as the people have mental capacity to make the decisions.
Okay, so mental capacity. Okay, that's still a, I shared with you with my own dad in particular, who was such a responsible person. He had everything set up. Everything was handwritten on an old manila file. This document, things were inserted inside. And when he used to say, come here, doll, let me show you something. I was like, no, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. Because I knew what it was going to kind of be about. And yet when his time came, it made everything easier from that perspective, because I didn't even have to go hunting for it. I knew where everything was. I just had to read the files. My brothers and sisters, there it is. It's in Daddy's handwriting. And I'm one of 6, so you can imagine the kind of conversations that might happen when you have 6 people opining about no this, no that. So I guess a lot of people might say, well, if it were me, this is what I would want to do. Well, then guess what? One day it will be about you. So have that conversation and get that, as you say, documented.
This is the beauty of coming together. Once someone has made the decision on who their decision maker is, who their healthcare decision maker is, what they want and wouldn't want. Would you want to be on a ventilator and stay on a ventilator if you have no brain activity? You can be, I encourage people to write as much as they can, because we can't think of every scenario. But would you want CPR or would you not want CPR, depending on your health, where you are. That's why I say evaluate annually. I tell people, make it your birthday gift to yourself. Take an hour, review your advanced directives. I have the right people in place to make my decisions, because you should have a primary and then a first alternate. You should always have at least 2, but never co. That's my opinion. It's not.
Right. That opens up another discussion. So when is the worst time? Is there a worst time or a worst time to have that conversation with someone? Is there a bad time to ever have that conversation?
The bad time to have it is after it's too late. They're in the hospital, or their dementia has progressed to the point where they are no longer able to have the mental capacity to make decisions. Early on in dementia, they can make their decisions, and they have a lot. A gentleman, a couple I worked with, he was relatively early in his dementia journey, and he was just so adamant that he wanted to make his decisions, and he wanted them in writing so that when he knew he would progress in his dementia, but he didn't want his family having to decide and guess what he would want. It was so important to him, and he got it done. But it came to the point where he's now doesn't even recognize his family. His wife had contacted me not too long ago about how grateful they are to have had his guidance and guidelines to follow, because it's been a difficult journey. It doesn't mean that it's easy, but it means that it's so important.
And you're truly fulfilling the wishes of someone who you obviously loved, and who put this person in charge and entrusted the responsibility, because it is a big responsibility. I've been that person for a number of people, and I'll tell you that for me, because of that, I learned for me that I needed to do that. And for me, years ago, before I had chemotherapy for an advanced cancer that I was grateful that chemo was still a little bit of an open window for me, and praise God, that I already had that conversation with my husband. And he was the only one that I knew I needed to have the conversation with. And I brought the documents. I had people that worked for me sign it. So it wasn't emotional for him. They just witnessed it. I went downstairs to the bank where they knew me. They didn't even have to read it. They just said, I know who you are. They said, and it was a closed discussion at that time. So that for me, I thought, I wouldn't want to have that conversation at the point in time where there were a serious medical condition pending. Have it when you're not so stressed and the people around you are not feeling, oh my God, she's contemplating death. She's thinking she's dying. There's something we don't know. No, go out, have a cocktail, sit down, talk about it.
Well, before I even thought of doing advanced care planning as a business, my 3 sons were heading back to college. It was the end of summer, and I said, and I have 3 sons that are 3 years apart, and I said, okay, guys, I want a 4-hour block of your time at the holidays, because your dad and I are now 57, and I want you, anything can happen, but I want you to know what we would want if something happened. And I told my husband, we're having a family, so I said, we're having a family meeting. It might take an hour, it might take 6. I don't really know. But my boys are best friends, and I did not want their close relationship fractured because they disagreed what to do with me if something happened and I couldn't make my decision. So I thought I'd get pushback, but it was great. We had the most wonderful conversation. There was laughter. There were tears mostly on my part because, I get emotional talking about this. I get emotional talking about it with people that I don't even know. It's just, I want the right decisions. I want them to make what's right for them, not for me. And so I told my sons, but, I found out one of my sons let us know that if anything happened to him, he wanted his brain donated to Boston University's CTE study for traumatic brain injury because he had one really bad concussion in high school sports. And I would never, ever have known that. And, my other son, even though he ended up going to college in Montana, he's like, I do not want country music played if I can't make a decision. He's like, I love it because I've grown to love it in Montana, but I don't want to play it if I'm in a coma, So we had a lot of laughter, but it was so rich and valuable. And I said, we're going to do this every 5 years, which reminds me that it'll be 5 years. They said this was really important. And they were glad that they had it. But, I encourage people to create what's called a life binder with your advanced directives. I think everyone should have a will because it makes after death so much easier from that point of view. And, any financial policies, all your digital legacy, how to get into your accounts, all of this stuff, whatever is important, put in that life binder. And then review it every year.
Whatever could make it easier for those that are left to take care of the affairs here.
Yes.
We hear the word, we know the word, many of us, doula, and we think of that as at the beginning of life. Mm-hmm. Your company, such a beautiful name, Radiant Morning, Mourning, Radiant Morning, and that you are doulas. Talk to us about the company, the mission of the company, the perspective of how you work with clients.
Well, Radiant Morning is my own company. That's my advanced care planning, getting your affairs, end of life planning company. And then Gentle Passage Doula Collective is a group of 5 of us. I didn't even know what a death doula or an end of life doula was 5 years ago when I met these women. But it is people that have been trained in being present, being supporting people in a non-medical way at end of life. And having been a nurse that worked at end of life, to be able to come in a non-medical way and be there for comfort, support, spiritual support, emotional support, practical support for the families. We work with people, there's 5 of us in our collective, and we work with people from pre-death, which is advanced care planning, which I think everyone should do when they're healthy and can
Mhm.
make sound decisions. All the way through active dying, being vigilant, being with families at the bedside as needed, helping them prepare to be with their loved one on that journey. So at families, I always use that term loosely because it could be families by birth or families by choice. And then after death, with the bereavement, with funeral, celebrating, life celebrations, anything that goes. So doulas are there every step of the way. We have one doula in our group that's an advocate. She goes as a patient advocate and goes to doctor's appointments and helps them interpret. When doctors have 15 or 20 minutes now, there's no
Yes.
time.
Yes.
So there's so many different ways doulas can work with people at the end of life. And like hospice, I was a hospice nurse, it's so complementary to hospice. Hospice is medical, it's highly regulated. The nurses, I had 1 hour to go in, assess, do whatever needed to be done, and then on to the next. And doulas can go in and be that non-medical support. So we're collaborating and in talks with a number of hospices in our area about how to bring doulas in and work with them. So it's exciting. We started a doula training program because there was so much interest and for people requesting, how do we become an end-of-life doula?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we started that in January, and we've had 3 training courses so far, and we have 2 more scheduled for the fall.
Wonderful. Now, it's something that happens to us. We are the deceased ones. Yet over the course of a normal lifespan, we do deal with it with so many other people many, many times. Our
Yes.
families, our friends, it's a generational kind of a thing. Yeah, it really is. This just makes so much sense to me. And as I said, I experienced it through my dad, how he had everything documented for his passing and our mom's passing, and through other people for whom I was the executor of an estate. It's that no one could question me. I said, here it is. I'm just reading a document. I'm just the facilitator. It was absolutely, I don't want to say no pressure, because you still have to do it, and there's still a lot of emotion in it, but I didn't have to make the decisions. I didn't have to make the big decisions. And that was a relief. It kind of indemnified me from what was actually happening. And I was so grateful to have all of that in place. I truly was. So I want to let people know how they can connect with you and take your beliefs, experiences, and passions, which is what we talk about here on B.E.P Talks, and say that it's serious. But I think it becomes more serious when you're not ready to deal with it. So
it becomes so much more serious. The one thing that I want to share is that, and then I'll tell you how you can get in touch with me. Joy and grief walk hand in hand, and so if you can find joy celebrating someone's life at the end of their life, it's such a beautiful experience, to be able to laugh at the bedside, to share joyous moments that have happened and memories. It's not only for those that are at the bedside, but hearing is the last to go, the last sense to go.
Yes, last sense to go.
If you're sharing and laughing, and there's lots of tears too, that's part of it, but it goes hand in hand. And that's what planning gives you, the opportunity to have this peaceful closure to the life well lived. And
for you and that,
for you and for them. And I've seen it so many times with people that were unresponsive at the very end, yet something happened and we knew that they were there with us and hearing and participating. So it gives people the confidence and ability to go through that.
And the best memory, the best final memory to have in the moment, and then all the memories are able to come flooding back. I want to put up here where people can connect with you. Right here. No, I'm putting it here. No, there it is.
Oh,
There it is. There it is. All you have to do to connect with someone who has the skills, the know-how, and the tremendous experience that you had as a nurse at end of life care for your patients, to truly know that this is what tends to happen, this is what you can avoid, you can create a better experience for those who are going on and those who are staying here until it's their time, and to learn from every experience. So all you have to do is link right here to learn more, and connect with Maureen, connect with Radiant Morning, and get your documents in place. And it's a very personal conversation. So I encourage you to have that personal conversation with Maureen, so that you know the personal, courageous, and generous conversation you ought to be having with your loved ones. And I think when you have it, when they hear it, it becomes rather practical, and it's like, oh yeah, I should do this too. And they will have it as well. So I am just so grateful to know that there are people like you and your whole team doing what you do and being there for people. And I think we probably all saw through the pandemic that there were so many people caught so off guard and so unprepared. And we were all in a shock collectively, and then so many people, too many people, individually with their families. There is a resource, and that's what we do here at B.E.P Talks. We want to bring you great resources. This is the resource for that very, very courageous and generous conversation to have when there is still time to have it. So just link right there and connect with Maureen, because she knows what she's, as you hear it. It's keep the light and the laughter in it while you can, and then no regrets when it's too late to have regrets. Maureen, I thank you so much for sharing this, for doing what you do. It's not easy, like you say. Even though you don't know people, there's still a what shall I say, a thread that goes through you, because you relate to what they're doing with your own family and your own dear friends. So Maureen has done a lot of the hard work for you, and she's gone through so many of the difficult experiences as a nurse. And now, as you can hear, she is truly very, very passionate about the work that she does at Radiant Morning. So Maureen, thank you again so much for being here on B.E.P Talks. And I want to thank everybody who joined us today. Please go and listen to all of the other wonderful, wonderful B.E.P Talks that we have on a whole myriad of conversations. Some of them are a little less light in topic than today's, perhaps, but they're all very, very important, and you will connect with so many. So B.E.P Talks is brought to you here, and we thank you for joining us. For more information about B.E.P Talks, just go to info@beptalks.com. And until we talk again, I say to everybody, may the best always be yet to come. And thank you for joining us. Maureen, again, thank you so much.
thank you, Beth.
Bye for now.